Everyone talks about mental toughness, like it's something you either have or you don't. Like some people were just built different. But if that were true, explain this. Why do people who look confident fall apart the moment something doesn't go their way? Why do disciplined people suddenly lose control over small things? Why do smart people repeat the same mistakes, knowing better every time? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people aren't mentally weak. They're mentally unaware. You can push yourself. You can motivate yourself. You can even control yourself for a while. But the moment pressure hits where you're unprepared, the mind takes over and runs its old programs. That's why stay strong advice works, until it doesn't. Carl Jung saw this long before mindset became a buzzword. He noticed something most people miss. The mind doesn't break under pressure. It breaks when you don't know what's actually happening inside it. Think about it. You tell yourself you're fine, until one comment throws you off. You say you've moved on, until the same situation hits a nerve again. You promise yourself you'll respond differently next time. And then next time comes. That's not a lack of discipline. That's training the wrong part of your mind. In this video, I'm not going to tell you to think positive or just push through. That advice creates fragile strength, confidence that collapses the moment life pushes back. Instead, I'm going to show you how mental strength actually works, why some people stay steady under pressure, why others react without meaning to, and how to train your mind in a way that doesn't crack when things get uncomfortable. By the end of this, you'll see why trying to dominate your thoughts makes you weaker, and why understanding them makes you unbreakable. Stay with me, because the first mistake almost everyone makes about mindset is the one that quietly ruins everything. So if mental strength isn't about forcing yourself to be tougher, and it's not about constant control, then what exactly have we been getting wrong? This is where most advice quietly fails. Because the first thing people are taught about mental strength is all of the most damaging lie. The first lie is this, that mental strength means control. Control your thoughts, control your reactions, control your emotions. Never hesitate, never doubt, never crack. It sounds powerful, but it creates a fragile mind. Carl Jung put it bluntly. One does not become strong by denying weakness, but by facing it. Here's what control actually looks like in real life. You're calm because nothing is testing you. You're confident because the situation is familiar. You're disciplined because the pressure is predictable. Then something unexpected happens. A comment hits harder than it should. A delay throws off your rhythm. A small mistake feels bigger than it is. And suddenly, the control is gone. Not because you're weak, but because control was never strength to begin with. When you rely on control, you're always one situation away from losing it. The mind doesn't respond well to being dominated. It resists, it stores pressure, and it looks for an exit. Jung warned about this exact pattern. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most people don't lose control randomly. They lose it in the same situations, with the same triggers, over and over again. That's not bad luck. That's unexamined patterns running the show. Real mental strength doesn't come from forcing yourself to stay composed. It comes from knowing what throws you off before it happens. From recognizing the reaction as it starts, not after it explodes. Here's the shift most people never make. Strength isn't about shutting reactions down. It's about not being surprised by them. Because the moment you understand what's happening inside you, it stops owning you, and this leads to the second mistake people make, the one that turns discipline into silent pressure. That's what we need to talk about next. Once you stop believing that control equals strength, something uncomfortable shows up. You realize you've been managing your mind the same way people manage a problem they don't want to deal with. You don't look at it. You push it down, and you hope it stays quiet. That brings us to the second trap. Most people don't control their thoughts. They suppress them. They tell themselves, "Don't think about that. Get over it. Be rational. Move on." And for a while, it works. You stay functional. You stay consoled. You keep things together on the surface. But underneath, pressure is building. Carl Jung warned about this directly. What you deny submits you. Here's how suppression actually plays out. You ignore irritation all day. You keep your tone neutral. You act like nothing bothers you. Then one small thing happens, and your reaction is bigger than the moment deserves. That's not overreaction. That's stored pressure finding an outlet. Suppression doesn't remove thoughts. It removes awareness. And when awareness is gone, reactions become automatic. Jung put it another way. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own inner reactions. The more you avoid certain thoughts, the more power they gain over your behavior. Not loudly, quietly. They show up in timing. In decisions you regret later. In patterns you keep repeating without understanding why. This is why people who never complain often break the hardest. Not because they're weak, but because they never gave their mind room to process pressure. A strong mind doesn't push everything down. It knows what's happening before it turns into action. That's the difference between composure and stability. Suppression creates a calm surface with a fragile core. Awareness creates a steady core, even when things get uncomfortable. And once you stop suppressing, something surprising happens. You don't become more reactive. You become less controlled by reactions. Because the moment you allow a thought to be seen, it no longer has to force its way out. And that leads directly to the next shift, the difference between looking tough and actually being stable. Once you stop suppressing what's happening inside you, something becomes clear. Not all strong people are actually strong. Some are just holding tension better than others. And that's where most people confuse toughness with stability. Toughness is loud. Stability is quiet. Toughness says, "I can handle this." Stability says, "I understand what this requires." Tough people rely on endurance. They push. They resist. They power through. And sometimes that works, until it doesn't, because toughness depends on energy. And energy runs out. Stability depends on orientation. It's not about how much you can take. It's about how well you stay aligned under pressure. Carl Jung captured this difference clearly. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Here's what that looks like in real situations. A tough person reacts fast. They defend. They explain. They justify. A stable person pauses, not because they're unsure, but because they're not being pulled by the reaction itself. Stability doesn't mean nothing affects you. It means fewer things knock you off center. That's why stable people don't need to prove strength. They don't overreact to criticism. They don't rush to fix every uncomfortable moment. They can stay present without needing control. Toughness often collapses under repetition. The same pressure, again and again, slowly wears it down. Stability adapts. Jung warned about this trap. Rigid certainty is a sign of inner imbalance. When you need to appear strong at all times, your mind has no room to adjust. But when your strength comes from understanding your own reactions, you don't need armor. You need awareness. That's the shift most people never make. They try to become harder when what they actually need is to become steadier. And once you understand that difference, you're ready for the habit that actually builds an unbreakable mind. That's where this goes next. Once you see the difference between toughness and stability, the question changes. It's no longer, how do I become stronger? It becomes, what do stable people actually do differently? The answer isn't dramatic, it's uncomfortable. And most people avoid it. The habit is simple, but it's not easy. You stay with your reaction instead of escaping it. Most people feel a reaction and immediately move away from it. They distract themselves. They justify it. They act on it. Stability begins when you do none of those things. Carl Jung understood this deeply. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Here's what this looks like in everyday moments. Something throws you off. Your body tightens. Your thoughts speed up. The urge to respond kicks in. Instead of fixing it or fighting it, you pause. Not to judge yourself, not to calm yourself down, just to notice what's actually happening. Most people never do this. They're either reacting or recovering. But this pause is where strength is built. When you stay with a reaction, it stops being a command. It becomes information. You start to see patterns. What situations hit harder than others? What comments trigger defensiveness? What moments make you rush decisions? Jung said it plainly. Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. Observation takes effort. But it pays back control in a different way. Not forced control. Informed control. This habit feels uncomfortable because it removes your usual escapes. You can't blame the situation. You can't rush to distraction. You can't hide behind explanations. You just stay present. And here's the paradox. The more familiar you become with your reactions, the less power they have over you. You don't suppress them. You don't dramatize them. You outgrow them. That's how an unbreakable mind is built. Not by eliminating reactions, but by no longer being owned by them. And once you have this habit, there's a second shift that changes everything. Because noticing a reaction is only half the work. What you do next determines whether strength actually forms. Once you learn to stay with a reaction, instead of escaping it, something becomes obvious. Not every thought that shows up deserves your loyalty. And this is where real strength begins to separate from noise. Most people don't realize this, but they live as if every thought is a fact. If the mind says something, they assume it must be true. If a thought appears, they treat it like an instruction. That's not awareness. That's automatic identification. Carl Jung warned about this exact trap. The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. Here's how identification quietly weakens you. A thought appears, I messed that up. Instead of questioning it, you become it. Your posture changes, your energy drops, your next decision shrinks. Nothing external changed, only your relationship to a thought. A stable mind doesn't argue with every thought. It also doesn't obey them. It observes them. Jung put it this way: who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Translated into practical terms, when you stop chasing every mental reaction outward, you gain leverage over what happens next. This doesn't mean positive thinking. It means accurate thinking. You don't say, "That thought is wrong." You say, "That thought is present." That single shift creates space, and space is where choice lives. Once you stop identifying with every thought, you stop turning temporary reactions into permanent stories. You don't spiral, you don't catastrophize, you don't overcorrect. You respond. This is why mentally strong people sound calmer. Not because they have better thoughts, but because fewer thoughts get promoted to leadership. An unbreakable mindset isn't built by silencing the mind. It's built by not mistaking noise for direction. And once you understand that, you're ready to see the final trap, the one that looks helpful but quietly undermines everything. That's what we need to talk about next. Once you stop identifying with every thought, another assumption starts to crack. That strength means always sounding confident, always staying upbeat, always reframing everything as fine. This is where mindset advice quietly goes wrong. Constant positivity looks strong from the outside, but internally it creates blind spots. When you force everything into an optimistic frame, you stop responding to what's actually happening. Carl Jung warned about this kind of imbalance. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness. Here's how constant positivity weakens you. Something isn't working. You feel tension. You sense resistance. But instead of adjusting, you tell yourself, "It's all good." That gap between reality and narration costs energy. The mind has to work overtime to maintain the story. And anything that requires maintenance can fail under pressure. This is why people who always stay positive often collapse suddenly. They didn't adapt. They postponed adaptation. A stable mind values accuracy over optimism. It doesn't exaggerate problems, but it doesn't minimize them either. Jung put it simply, "What you deny submits you." Positivity becomes a problem when it replaces honesty, when it prevents you from noticing early signals, when it delays necessary change. Real mental strength isn't about feeling good. It's about staying oriented. Sometimes the most constructive response isn't encouragement. It's correction. Not harsh, not dramatic, just precise. An unbreakable mindset allows discomfort without turning it into a crisis. It doesn't rush to feel better. It focuses on responding better. And once you stop using positivity as armor, you can finally train your mind in a way that holds up over time. That's where the daily training rule comes in. The one simple structure that turns awareness into strength. Once you stop hiding behind constant positivity, the question becomes practical. How do you actually train the mind day to day without overthinking it or turning it into another performance? This is where everything gets simple. Mental strength isn't built in big moments. It's built in the small, ordinary ones most people ignore. Here's the rule. Notice it, name, choose. That's it. No affirmations, no long routines, no special environment. Just this applied consistently. Notice. Something shifts inside you. Tension, irritation, urgency. Most people rush past this moment. You don't. You catch the reaction as it begins. You label what's happening without softening it and without dramatizing it. Not "this is bad." Not "I shouldn't feel this." Just a clean description. Naming slows the reaction down. It turns impulse into information. Carl Jung understood the power of this step. Where wisdom reigns, There is no conflict between thinking and feeling. Choose now comes the part most people skip. You decide how to respond with awareness, not habit. You don't ask, "What do I feel like doing?" You ask, "What response keeps me aligned?" This choice doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be conscious. At first, this feels awkward, slower, less automatic. That's a good sign. It means you're no longer being dragged by reactions you never questioned. Over time, something shifts. You stop reacting late. You stop repairing damage after the fact. You start responding earlier, cleaner, and with less effort. That's how the mind becomes strong. Not rigid, not loud. Reliable. And once this rule becomes second nature, you'll notice something else changing, the way strength actually feels on the inside. That's where we go next. Once the training rule becomes automatic, something unexpected happens. Strength stops feeling like effort. It starts feeling like clarity. An unbreakable mind doesn't feel intense. It feels steady. There's less internal arguing, less urgency to prove anything, less pressure to react immediately. Not because nothing affects you, but because fewer things hijack you. You stop living inside constant mental commentary. You hear thoughts without needing to answer them. You feel reactions without being pushed by them. Carl Jung described this kind of inner orientation clearly. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. In practical terms, this means you're no longer carrying reactions that don't belong to the present moment. You respond to what's actually in front of you. An unbreakable mindset feels quieter. Decisions take less energy. Setbacks don't demand a full internal debate. You don't need to be confident all the time. You don't need to feel strong. You just stay oriented. Pressure still exists. Challenges still happen. But they don't define your inner state. This is the difference people notice but can't quite name. They say things like, "You seem grounded," or "You don't overreact anymore." What they're really noticing is stability. Jung captured this shift perfectly. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others. Translated into everyday terms, when you understand your own reactions, external chaos loses its leverage. An unbreakable mind doesn't resist reality. It meets it cleanly. And once you experience that, you stop chasing strength. You become it. That's the real secret. Not a mindset you force, but one you've trained to hold under pressure. Now that you know what an unbreakable mind feels like, it's tempting to think, "Okay, I get it. I just need to do all of this every day." But here's the catch. Knowing isn't enough. Most people stop here. They watch, they nod, and nothing changes. That's why the final piece is about more than habits or rules. It's about how you choose to step into your mind from this moment forward. Here's the truth. Most mental strength advice fails because it treats the mind like a muscle you can just push harder. But your mind isn't a muscle. It's a map of patterns. And the strongest people don't fight the map. They read it. You've seen the steps. Notice. Name, choose. Stay with reactions instead of running from them. Stop identifying with every thought. Let reality guide your response instead of constant positivity. Do this consistently, and something surprising happens. You start to feel strong without trying. You stop being hijacked by frustration, fear, or uncertainty. You start seeing yourself clearly, and for the first time, you don't need to fake strength. And here's the mystery. Most people will never take this seriously. They'll keep chasing motivation, pushing through, and asking why it never sticks. But if you're willing to actually train the way Jung suggested, to face reactions instead of suppressing them, to notice instead of obey, then you won't just survive pressure, you'll move through it unshaken. Remember Jung's words, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That's not just a quote, it's a challenge. The real question now isn't, can I become mentally strong? It's, am I willing to look clearly at what's inside me and step into it? Most people won't. Those who do, they quietly become unbreakable. So here's your choice. Step forward, or stay where you are. The mind doesn't care what you call strength. It only responds to training. And what you do in the next moments will determine whether you're training or just pretending.